Welcome to Between State Lines.
Welcome back to Between State Lines, episode 20, the big 2-0. And today we have a very special guest, Morgan. She's going to tell us a very, very interesting, creepy, crazy, whack story about Israel Keys. But before we get into that, I just want to make sure everyone knows the story is pretty graphic at points. I know there's mention of suicide, and rape, sexual assault, a lot of different things. If you get triggered by any of that, please, please, please do not listen. We'll see you next week. So with that out of the way, I am going to turn it over to Morgan. Morgan, before we get started into the story, we do ask our guests a few questions.
Okay.
Number one, if Jeff Bezos walked up to you in the street and, you didn't decide to punch him, but you had a conversation with him, and he said, "Hey, Morgan, I'm going to give you $2 million. But for that $2 million, you have to get into a box. It's an open air box. You can move around as much as you want, but you're in a box. And then in that box, there are like 50,000 cockroaches. And you have to stay in that box for a whole entire day."
No. He can have the money. I am deathly, it's so funny that you bring up cockroaches because I am deathly afraid of them and they haunt me. Literally, I just moved from Florida to Texas and they were always in Florida and I thought I was escaping them. And literally my first night coming to Texas, I go to the front door and there's one at the front door. And I have, not to digress, but I have so many horror stories about how cockroaches haunt me. So he could have the money. I don't need the money that bad. There's no way. I would never do it. No way.
On my side.
Yeah. Okay, so what if, let's change it up then. What if you said for $50 million, no cockroaches, you just have to get into a coffin and be in the ground 6 feet under for 24 hours. And you get, what did I say, $50 million? Whatever it was. $50 million for 24 hours in the ground. You have oxygen, you have, water. I mean, there's no way to go to the bathroom, but you have food and water if you need it.
Oh yeah, I mean, I feel like that's easy. That would be an easy 50 million, especially if I have water. I mean, I'm not really a fan of confined spaces too much, but I mean, for $50 million and there's oxygen and water, I could do that.
So team one for Holden. I guess Steff also did say she would do that, but the money had to be with her.
Yes, I have to have full faith that the money is actually getting paid out, so the money would have to be underneath me. Then I know they're coming for me.
Right.
I don't trust anybody. No one. They'd be like, leave her there. It's fine.
I mean, that's a great way to look at it because you really can't trust anybody, especially if Jeff Bezos comes up to you and is like, "Hey, I'll give you $50 million if you do X, Y, and Z." I would want to see that money firsthand before doing that. I didn't even think about that. So that's a great way to look at it.
Thank you. Thought of it all.
There is nothing I wouldn't do for money. I told Steff I would I would cut my hand off for $2 million, and Bezos could have my hand for $2 million. It could be he's a freak and he probably wants that kind of stuff in his house, so he could have it for $2 million.
No way.
Yeah, Holden has he'll do anything for money. He also wants to be haunted, so I don't know about this guy.
See, I'm very much a believer in whenever you die, money isn't going to mean anything. None of your possessions are going to mean anything, So I wouldn't do anything for money. To me, money is replaceable, it comes and goes. But for the 50 million, I would definitely do the coffin with the oxygen and water. That seems like an easy 50 million.
Well, and I just don't think that Holden realizes how much hand surgeons are. Put it, and the success rate is pretty low. Yeah.
Well, in this case, Bezos is keeping my hand, so I don't need a hand surgeon.
This is the first time I heard that one. He gets to just keep it. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah.
Well, So after the week we've had, I'm going to turn over to Morgan to tell us one of the most craziest stories in the world.
Yes, so Israel Keys, I had no idea who he was, and I'm very much like a true crime junkie. I really enjoy it. I've seen so many shows, listened to so many podcasts, and like when you think of serial killers, you think of like Ted Bundy, Gacy, the Zodiac Killer, Dahmer, like all those names are what you associate the term serial killer with. And so recently I was hanging out with someone who was saying that she listened to a crime junkie podcast episode and the name Israel Keys like kept coming up, but there wasn't an actual episode about it. Since then I have found episode on Crime Junkie that is just on Israel Keys, which is really good. You guys should listen. But so she decided to Google him, and we were hanging out, and we both were like Googling him, and we ended up finding a documentary as well that's on Apple TV. But he didn't, I had no idea who he was. And so I have literally gone down like a rabbit hole, like probably for 2 months, like researching this. It's been a great distraction for me because I just can't believe that he's not as known as other serial killers. Because to me, like, it's just, it boggles my mind. But basically, just like a little backstory for him, he was born in Utah, and his track record is apparently, and you don't know for sure because he didn't admit to all of it, and a lot of victims haven't been found, but roughly about 11 victims anywhere from like 2001 to 2012, and some people speculate that his first victim was in 1998, but she was never found. But the crazy thing about him, like his signature, were these things, we'll call them unaliving kits. And they were basically buckets. Now, he traveled for work all over the United States. And he had these buckets that he would bury in different parts of the United States when he would like travel for work. And they would have like cash, weapons, rope, anything he would need to unalive someone, basically. And so that just gives me shivers because like he would place them all over the United States, all over the place, and he wouldn't use them then. He would leave them and then travel, and then he would come back like years later, knew exactly where that unaliving kit was and use it. And his other signature was that like his MO was that he didn't have an MO. All of his victims were unalived at random, like just victims of opportunity, basically. And so he would go to these places and would go and find this bucket of this kit of all of his things that he needed, and then just use that to get someone. And the crazy thing is that because his MO was, he didn't have an MO. All of his, like, none of it, were people that he knew or stalked or anything like that. It was just victims of opportunity. He was not on the police's radar for years. Like, he was getting away with this for years. And the only reason that he got on the police's radar, which was in 2012, was because of someone. Her name was Samantha Coing, and she was in Alaska. And basically, he was there. He lived there, and she was 18. She worked this little drive-in coffee shop where like one person, very small, one person works, and he, kidnapped her and everything, and he basically, she was presumed missing pretty quickly because her boyfriend was supposed to pick her up from work, and he used her cell phone and had texted from her cell phone to her boyfriend like, hey, I'm gonna go spend a couple days with some friends out of town, let my dad know. And he like automatically knew that that was suspicious. So like he told the dad, and the dad like immediately reported her missing that night. So the crazy thing is, like, one of the reasons that like he became on the radar was because he had her debit card and her phone, and her debit card, like, she only had like $200 in her checking account. So basically that she didn't have her debit card on him. So he told her, like, hey, where's your debit card? And she's like, it's in my boyfriend's truck. So he still unnoticed made her take him to the boyfriend's truck outside of the house and got the truck and got the debit card, still unnoticed, even though they already knew that, like, she was missing. I don't understand how that happened, like how he was that calculated and that careful. But basically, he took her back to his house, and there was a shed next to his house, and he, essayed her and, unalived her. And then the next day, he goes on a 2-week cruise with his family, and his daughter and girlfriend were literally in the house next to this. And this is Alaska, so freezing temperatures, right? So he literally does this and then just like skips town and goes on a 2-week vacation like nothing happened. And so she was in there the whole time, and there wasn't any decomposition because it was in Alaska, and so it was wintertime cold, right? So the the main the main thing that got him caught was when he came back 2 weeks later, he wanted more money. So he basically sent a text message from her cell phone to her family asking for $30,000 for ransom money. And of course, they wanted proof of life, right? And so he took a picture of her with a newspaper next to it and basically put it in this park with like a very cryptic message on it. And so they deposited the 30,000, like the FBI and the family got together and they deposited the $30,000 into her account. But the crazy thing is, the thing that gives me, like, it has made me lose a little bit of sleep, because if you Google this picture, like, at first when I was told about it, I was like, no, I don't want to see it. And then I was like, oh, I got to see it. So basically, the ransom picture, the proof of life picture that he took, she looks like she's been tortured or whatever, right? But like, she's awake, eyes open, with the newspaper next to her face. Well, it turns out, like, hold for dramatic effect, it turns out that she was actually dead in that picture, 2 weeks dead. And he literally took fishing line and sewed her eyes open and put makeup on her face. And of course, there's no decomposition, right? Because it's been 2 weeks, but it's Alaska. And so they thought she was alive, right? And so then he just was traveling all over the US, and he was using her debit card, at ATMs to withdraw the money. And of course, they had an alert on it, but, response time for police is usually like 3 to 6 minutes, even if it's alerted. And so he always was like covered up, with a mask, hoodie, whatever. But the only like common denominator was a white Ford Focus was always in the vicinity of the ATM footage. So basically, that's how he got caught. Was he was actually in Texas, and they put an APB out on the car, and he was in Texas, and there was a state trooper that was working that day and just so happened to see a white Ford Focus. And he was like, I'm just going to, like, this looks like what the APB is. I'm going to follow him. So he followed him for a while, and he ended up doing like a minor traffic violation. I think it was like he was speeding or something like that. And pulled him over and asked for his identification. And, it was Alaska identification. And he knew, like, this is who it was. So that's basically like how he got caught. Was his last victim, pretty much, was what actually put him on police's radar, which blows my mind, because all of the people that he alleged, unalive, they were like cold cases, or, the police ruled it as accident. And he even said that in like some of his interviews, that like, I basically set it up to where if the police found them, it would look like an accident. And there's some people who have never been found, like just missing persons cases. So
the craziest thing, I was watching this video earlier about him and the his last victim, and I first of all I accidentally saw the picture because it was on the video, didn't know what it was until I looked at it. I was like, oh crap. It was awful. But so in when he kidnapped her and was driving her to his house, they pulled up at a stoplight next to a cop car, and she didn't do anything because she thought her best action would be to cooperate and she would
Mm-hmm.
live probably.
Mm-hmm.
And so that split second, she could have like done something and gotten probably away, and he would have gotten caught. Just insane how close he was to getting caught, and she was being saved, and it didn't work out.
Yeah, I heard on the Crime Junkie episode that she allegedly was able to escape him like from the parking lot at her job, which was I think next to like a Waffle House or something like that. I mean, he was able to get her back, but she was able to like escape for a little bit, but nobody noticed it. And that's what's crazy to me is that like he was just never on the radar or just got away with it. And the thing is, when you look at other serial killers, they all have MOs or they all have patterns, right? And so like even if they were never caught or whatever, they have these cryptic ways of like, or they keep, mementos or trophies, right? He didn't do that. So that's what's crazy is like I think he got cocky, to be honest with you, and was, using the debit card and knew that that was going to alert it, but he thought he was clever, but he wasn't. So, whenever he got caught and was with the police and the FBI, like he just came in hot, right? And he was like, I'll tell you about my victims only if you will ensure that I get, uh, like unalived, right? Like he wanted the death penalty, like executed within a year. Like he wanted it within a year. And he also didn't want it publicized because he had like a 10-year-old daughter and he didn't want her to know. And it's like, he was very big on the fact that, you wouldn't guess that I did this because I lived such a double life. And, no one knew, no one had any idea. And I've gotten away with it for this long. So I don't want it to be publicized. Like I want to tell what I want to tell, and then I want to get executed, and then I want to be done with it. And so like in the midst of his interviews with the police and the FBI, like he talked about Samantha, and he also talked about the only other people that he identified was a couple. I think it was in Maine, um, Bill and Lorraine, and they were in their house and they didn't have a dog, they didn't have a kid, which was apparently what he was looking for. And he basically um killed them, but he brought them to this like abandoned farmhouse. And when he was telling them about their location, apparently this abandoned farmhouse was demolished after that. And the construction workers, they reported that there was like a foul smell, like it was just awful, but they still basically demolished the house and took everything to a landfill. So even though he identified where like he put them and everything, that they were never identified or that their remains were never found. And it's crazy to me too that the police or nobody did thought to do anything. They basically just chalked it up to this is just like a deceased animal or something. And but those were the only two that he identified and like told the police where they were. And like Samantha's, he dismembered her and put her like in a lake somewhere, fishing hole in Alaska. And they were able to find her and retrieve her, but she's the only one that they were able to find and retrieve. But like he basically was bragging like I have a little less than a dozen victims, so from the research that I did, it's like 11, but he didn't identify any of them. And so it's just wild to me that like he got away with it for that long, and that, he just had no MO. It was just all like victims of opportunity, and it just makes you wonder, like, am I just out and about in my daily life and there could be somebody like that that's just like, I think I might want to unalive her today. Like, just make it quick, please. I don't need torture stuff. But yeah, so like during my research, like I said, I really like, serial killers, true crime, that kind of stuff. And anytime I hear about people that are just deranged like that, my first thing that I do is I want to know what their childhood was like. Because, like behavioral analysis people, like that's what they study is, okay, like, why is this person like this? Like The Office, where he says, "Why are you the way that you are?" That's what I like. That's what I wanted to do after, like researching him and stuff. I started to like look up his childhood, and there wasn't a ton of stuff that like really stood out to me, but I did take some screenshots of his childhood, and basically it said that he grew up in Washington, and they basically lived isolated in the woods with no electricity or heat, which, I mean, I guess that could kind of chalk it up to it. I don't know. But they were apparently a part of the um, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which, I feel like that probably screws up a lot of people, because there's plenty of like cult documentaries on that too, and so basically, like, one thing that kind of was chilling to me too is, like, so he grew up in an Amish community, but it said that growing up he would break into neighbors' homes to steal guns, loved hunting, and this part just really got to me. It said pursued anything with a heartbeat. And yeah, so basically he would like torture animals, and it says, that behaviors lead to psychopathy, which we obviously know that. Um, but like that's what he would do, is that's where it started, and it didn't really go into details about like any torture or anything like that. But basically, like, he left the church, and his family and siblings disowned him. So yeah, like he didn't really have a huge childhood like devastation trauma that caused him to be the way that he was, but he was in the military as an Army Ranger for a little bit. And so in one of his teammates or whatever apparently quoted him saying that, "I would like to kill you," is like what he told his his military member on his team. But yeah, so I think he sat down with the FBI and the police for about 6 months, going back and forth, telling them different things and bragging about different things and how he got away with it and how he lives this double life. And, you know, to me, it's just very cocky to go in saying, "I'll tell you, but you have to execute me in a year, and then I'll give you information." Like, it doesn't work that way, like, even if that's the way that you want it to be and you're going to like give them this information that they want, execution doesn't work that way. Like, legally, they can't do that. Like, people sit on death row for years, like, you can't just demand to be executed in a year. So basically, I think it started to get publicized, and because, I mean, they can't guarantee that, because they were basically like, we want to give families closure that you're telling us about. So, you can't expect those families to not put that information out there. He ended up, I think, a year after being in prison, somewhere around that line, he ended up unaliving himself in his prison cell, and he left this like 4-page note that was really rambling and stuff. But I did write down a quote from it that just stood out to me the most, and a lot of people talk about it. And basically, he was like describing, I think it was his victims, and it says, I looked into your eyes. They were so dark, warm, and trusting, as though you had not a worry or care. The more guileless the game, the better potential to fill up those pools without your fear. Yeah. Talk about bone chilling. I was just like, oh my goodness. And I don't think he deserves his whole 4-page note read, like he doesn't deserve that recognition in my opinion, but just very, very callous and meticulous. And like, I just don't understand, like I don't understand how you can have a thought in your brain of like, what I feel like doing, I just feel like finding a random person today and just ending their life. Doesn't matter what their story is. It doesn't matter if I know them or if they've done me wrong or they fit a certain profile. Like, you're just going to be picked at random. Like, let's just spin the wheel, and that's the pick of the day. So,
The craziest thing I read was that while he was in prison, he took his own blood and he drew 12 skulls on the wall, 11 being his victims and one being himself. I think that was when he killed himself. But like, that's why they think that there was definitely at least probably 11 victims, and the 12th one was him. That was crazy.
Yeah, I did read that actually, and it's just crazy to me. Like a lot of people that get caught, while they're awaiting trial or they're awaiting execution, whatever. Like, they always find a way to just unalive themselves, and then they don't have to face the consequences. But yeah, it's just very bone chilling to me because like it's just, I can't believe that it makes sense that he wasn't on the police's radar because everybody was a random victim. But like, the unaliving kits around the country, like knowing exactly where you buried them in the woods somewhere and going back to it, like some were like the one for Bill in the Rain in Maine. Like, apparently it had been like 2 to 4 years since he had buried that bucket with all of the items he needed, and then went back to that exact spot. That, to me, like, that's like, how do you? I can't remember what I ate for lunch sometimes. Like, how can you remember where you buried something years later? Like, it said, like, whenever he traveled, like, he took his battery out of his phone and didn't, like, paid with cash. He didn't leave traces of anything. So, like, I just don't understand, like, how much of a monster you have to be to where you can remember where all of those things are. Like, it's
I think to be that meticulous and then to like all of a sudden want the $30,000 and then going around the country trying to take that money and then to make these demands, like all of a sudden he was just so jaded that he thought that he could just have whatever he wanted and make the rules after that point. Like, what changed for him from being like this? That is truly terrifying, like going around the country. And yeah, I've heard about the kill kits and hiding them for years at a time. Like, how did you be that patient and that meticulous and then going to where he was at the end? Like, it seems so different to me.
Yeah, I think that's the mind-boggling part, right? Is that, I think that when it came to Samantha and the demanding of the ransom money and using the ATMs, like I said, I think he got cocky, but I also think that, like, maybe a part of him wanted to get caught, and like, you hear that a lot about criminals, like when they finally do get caught, like they just can't do it anymore, but they have to make a game out of it, and I think that he, like, was so used to getting away with it and wasn't on the radar for like over 10 years getting like doing this, that he was just like, okay, I'm not gonna, I don't think he was like, I don't think that he thought he was going to get caught though with the car and it being in the, because he was very careful and meticulous about, like, he knows that there's ATM camera footage, right? But he like wore a mask or wore a hood, was like unidentifiable. But like you said, it's just so meticulous to do all of that, and like just demand that money. Like, I don't think he'd ever did that before with any of his other victims, and I think maybe he was like spiraling or wasn't sure how he was gonna get away with it. But it's just crazy to me that she was just chilling in a shed in Alaska for 2 weeks and he's just on a cruise, like living his best life. Like, how can you, like, there's no way I could have done that. I would never do that anyway, but I mean, like, there's no way that I could have just resumed on with my normal life knowing that I did something like that. That's what I don't get, is how people can have a double mind like that and live two separate lives. Like, how do you not, like, how do you do that, especially do it for 10 plus years? Like that, I couldn't, there's no way. Like, I couldn't, like, to me, that would be mentally exhausting trying to live a double life all the time. And he really lived like a triple life.
Makes me think that he had, like, based on how meticulous he was, having these kill kits all over the place, basically making these murders look like accidents. I feel like he might have had more than 11. Like, he probably had a lot more victims, because I think personally he just got bored and was like, I'll make a game of this, but like if I get caught, like, fine, whatever, I'm done. I've reached the end of it. But I don't know, just being that meticulous and that ridiculous, leaving a girl in a shed for 2 weeks and then dressing her up to look alive to get money, like being that psychotic, makes me think there's just so much more he did that never
Hmm.
got found.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Was there another time that he did it so close to home?
Um, not from my research, and I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that. And I'll probably now that's I'll go research that. But I'm not sure. I think that most of them were not close to home because he traveled for work. I think he like had a construction company or something, or did that. But I did read something that, like, whenever he was in the army, there was at one point where he was in Egypt, and there weren't any like crimes reported, which obviously it's going to be hard to track down crimes in Egypt in that time frame. But um, I agree. Like, I think there's probably way more victims. There's way more things that he could have done. But apparently, in his travels abroad, I think to like Mexico and other countries, like there was, to me, that's like even more of a key opportunity for him to do something, because it's another country. It's going to be really hard to be traced, especially when you're a U.S. citizen, like, and you're not there for a long period of time. So I definitely, I do agree. I think that there probably is a lot more victims, but it's weird to me that he did like the 11 or the 12 skulls thing. But maybe that's just what he, in his mind, told himself, was, I have 11 victims and I'm the 12th victim. Like, maybe he doesn't count the other ones. And there were also, like, apparently his first alleged victim, he kidnapped her and essayed her, and um he was able to she convinced him to let her go. And he basically told the police, like, after that experience, I told myself I would never let that happen again. And so I think there could have potentially, like Ted Bundy's case, there was a few victims that actually got away from him, and were able to tell their stories, and that helped. I think that helped the FBI a lot, being able to, for them to like identify him or whatever. But yeah, there's got to be more, even if they weren't unalive. Like, I'm sure that he probably kidnapped and tortured and all of that stuff. And it's, like you said, just psychotic brain. Like, I wish, like, I feel like other serial killers, we have a lot of their backstory, like what happened in their childhoods, or like details of their motives and their behaviors and their patterns and everything. But his is such a mystery, and we'll never know. We'll never know the truth about it. And it like makes me lose a little bit of sleep, because it's just, I just can't believe that it's not talked about more than it is, you know? Because I had no idea. And I feel like I'm like the serial killer queen. Like, and I had no idea about him until recently. So it's just insane.
So, real quick, to Steph's question, I looked it up, and there was a girl, 13-year-old girl, a Special Olympics medalist actually, in skiing, who disappeared in 1996 while waiting for a ride in Washington, where he lived. And her remains were found a month later, and they did question him about her death after he was arrested, and he would not confirm or deny killing her. So it seems like that one might have also been him, and that was where he was living too.
Yeah, because it just seems like maybe in the beginning, yeah, a little close to home, and then at the end, that's when things started getting like, I mean, he felt like he was too good for it. Like he found somebody close to his home life with like his daughter, and then going out and going on this cruise and still not being caught and coming back and going through with like the ransom letter. Like it just felt like okay, you're getting more, and like you're ramping up really really fast here compared to how like patient and meticulous it seems like it was. Yeah, I don't understand this person's mind, but also like thankful I do not understand this person's
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah. I feel like maybe if, like, obviously I would like a lot of things answered, but maybe sometimes it's best not to know, because then we might really lose sleep if we were inside of his mind, right?
Yeah.
You know, but I do think that he, like Holden said, he probably got bored, you know, like with it, and was trying to make a game out of getting caught, or like spiraling, you know, like, and there was, I think there was one in 1998. There was a girl that she was in college in New York somewhere, and just went missing, and she was never found, and he was in that same place the day that she disappeared. And I don't think he confirmed or denied that, but it's speculated that that was probably one of his first ones. I didn't know about the girl with the Special Olympics, but yeah, I'm sure there's so many that we just don't know, and we'll never know.
Yeah, and do
Well,
you think that maybe the skull thing was to like make it so people stop questioning things?
Yeah, that's a good point, actually.
um, the FBI, when they looked at his computer, they found over 70 saved topographical maps of different areas in the country. And so they've been trying to, over the course of like, the last 12 years, figure out if there are bodies there, if they're in the area, or if there's like kill kits there. And apparently, a podcaster from the podcast True Crime Bullshit found or claims to have found a kill kit just last month. So
Wow, that's crazy. Well, I guess that's how he kept up with where he put them, were those topographical maps. I was wondering. I didn't see that. So that answers a question that I had, because
like, if you have like a map of it, how the hell do you know where it is on that map? Like, I don't, like, it's just wild. You're
maybe he
saving an
just
area.
yeah, maybe he just was just so, like people like him, even though they're psychotic and monsters, could have had a photographic memory, maybe, or like maybe he just kept up with it in his mind. Like he had the map, and when he looked at the map, he knew where they were. But that's crazy, because I'm pretty sure in his interviews in the documentary that I watched, as I just watched it again tonight, before we got on here, and I think that there's some that are still buried that he never went back for. And I think that would be a cool, not that I would have time, but that would be a really cool thing to like look at those maps and try to find it. Like, I just need the FBI to put me on the case. Like, give me all the cold cases, all the missing people that they think are associated with them, and let me do my thing. Like, put me on the case. I'll solve it.
So I gotta ask each of you a question. So, based on Morgan, your serial killer prowess and like love that genre, and Steph, your interest in the Israel Keys case, do you think that um, being a serial killer or I guess a killer in general is like a inherently learned behavior, or is it in you from your birth? Like you have that, or are people just gonna be murderers no matter what, or is it learned?
um, I I think that it can go multiple ways. I think based on, just all of the podcasts and shows that I've watched, like I said earlier, a lot of it goes back to their childhood. But there are some people that, or serial killers or murderers that had great childhoods, that had nothing that caused them trauma. So I think, yeah, like people could be born that way. But I think it's more so, goes back to the behavioral side of it, where it's like associated with trauma or how they grew up or what they learned, like learned behaviors. But I also think that, it's great to be aware, and it's really entertaining, right, to like true crime and stuff. But if they have that little inkling in them, there's so much information at our fingertips now that wasn't like available with some of our most famous serial killers, that I think that it's dangerous in a way, because people can like look at all these examples. They could become copycat killers, or they have all of this information at their fingertips with documentaries and podcasts, to where they can learn from it, right? So I do think a lot of it is learned behavior, and that's scary to think about. But I still want to know. I'm still going to watch and listen to the true crime. But yeah, I think most of it is probably learned behavior and associated from trauma in childhood, or something that is just traumatic in somebody's life that just makes them switch that. But I do think some of it can probably be hereditary or genetic as well.
Yeah, like I don't know, I keep going back in my mind like an evil curiosity. Like that could just be like the fuel, the flame, and yeah, wanting to make some sort of name for themselves, because that honestly feels like what he was trying to do. Like at first, like he's like, "Can I do this?" And then he's like, "Yeah, I can do this." And then he just like kept progressing until it obviously got out of hand, but thank goodness it did, because that he's truly the most terrifying type of serial killer.
I agree with you, and I'm glad that he got caught, because I think that because of the way his mo was and his victim like choosing, he could have gone on for a long time, and I do think that at some point they do want to get caught, or they get bored, like you said, like or something. But it's good that he got caught when he did, because like just think of all the potential victims that were saved because of that. Like that's gives me a makes it just a little bit better.
Yeah, I think it's the podcast Radio Rental, where they have an episode where somebody's recounting like one of their own personal experiences, and it's just a tale of a person and like what they're going through at this one time, and having like this bad gut feeling in the person that they saw when they're going through this, and then later on seeing the news that Israel Keys was apprehended, and they were like, that was the guy. And I think that that's the story that I think of that's like the most chilling for me, thinking like, yeah, you could be interacting with somebody on your day-to-day, like just passing by somebody in a random cul-de-sac reading a newspaper, and it's like, oh, that person gave me a bad feeling.
Mhm.
And yeah, it turned out to be somebody who is truly a not great person to interact with. Like, get out of there now.
Yeah.
So I was listening to this podcast, Trial by Podcast, last week, and they were talking about how Ted Bundy um, was almost discovered one time by two random hikers. It was two people on a date who were out in the woods, and from the couple's side of the story, it was their first date, and for whatever reason, they went to go stargazing in the mountains. as you do on your first date with someone you don't know.
Right? Such a great first date.
But they both had like they had this like weird feeling the entire time up the mountains, and then the guy stepped on something that was really soft and kind of squishy, and then immediately like stood where you stepped, and then turned around and said, "Let's go, let's walk back." And Ted Bundy said that he had looked to my right, he would have seen me, and I would have killed them both. And so like just knowing you were that close, like Steph said, you're that close to knowing a sociopath, or that close to like seeing and being killed by someone. Maybe they wouldn't have been killed, but like that's freaking insane.
Yeah, I mean, coming in contact with somebody like that who is a known killer and being that close to having to have that interaction is terrifying.
Yeah, and I think that, like, some people in my life are like, man, you're a little bit obsessed with this true crime stuff, like my family doesn't really like true crime, and I'm always like, oh, I want to watch a true crime documentary. But I think that it's healthy in a way because it has made me so much more aware of my surroundings, especially, being like I'm not tall in stature. I'm very short. I can pack a punch. I'm tough, but you never know if somebody's coming up behind you. You know what I mean? So like anytime I'm anywhere, I feel like I'm just so hyper focused on my environment, and like I think that that's good to be that way. I think everybody should be that way. But like there's definitely been times in my life where I have come into contact with people that just like I just have strong intuition, like I'm just very much pick up vibes very quickly, and there's been times where I'm like, I don't know, that person might be plotting my death right now, or that person might be a serial killer. Like, I mean, it hasn't happened a ton, but there's like you said, like you come in contact with people sometimes and you just have that feeling, or people that could have been in the checkout line next to Ted Bundy or Israel, like it's just crazy to think about that. Or like you said, like reading the paper and being like, oh my gosh, I know that guy. Like just I really hope that's never my experience. I hope I like don't see somebody on the news and I'm like, I was sitting in traffic next to that person earlier today.
Yeah. So random. I don't know why I thought of this, but I heard this story about a guy who killed his dad and his mom, almost his mom, maybe like 10 years ago at home, and apparently his dad, they both were knifed in the head like a bunch of times, and his dad like got up the next morning and got the paper outside, did dishes, started the dishwasher, and then collapsed. Like did a whole morning routine, and then just collapsed on his front porch and died because apparently the knife blow hit some part of your brain where it's like it blocks memory and like pain and like you don't know what you're doing, and managed to like just survive for that long and then die. But the wife survives. That's one positive note. But I read that and I was like, holy crap! I can't imagine.
You don't notice all of the blood around you even, or
Right? Or be like, something's wrong here.
yeah.
Imagine like being the wife. You're like, what the fuck are you doing? Like I'm sitting here dying. Like you're just gonna go and do the dishes.
This
Like,
is
what's going on?
you are a real life zombie is what it feels like. Like
See, that's one thing I cannot get into is zombies. Like, I would be the first to die in a zombie apocalypse. I would. No way. No way I would survive.
nope. My nightmares.
Yeah,
So what?
same.
Okay, so I have heard this from several people that they would just like walk out into the zombie horde and get eaten. Would you do that, or would you try to survive and then eventually die, or would you
No,
just say "F this, I'm done"?
I would definitely unalive myself before I got ate by a zombie. That would be my first point of action in a zombie apocalypse. That would be the first thing I would do. Not to be morbid, but that would be what I would do. Like I don't have survival skills. Like I'm not a nature girly at all. Like I think I could learn, but I don't want to. So like I'm small, so I could probably hide for a little bit, but I just also am very clumsy, so I feel like I would be trying to hide, and like the movie A Quiet Place where you have to like I would be the first one to die in that film too, like in that environment. So there's no way I wouldn't try to survive. Like I've had conversations about this with people in my life, and they're like, "What are you gonna do? Like, we're gonna have to survive in a zombie apocalypse. You have to prepare. You have to think about this." And I'm like, I'm sorry, like I love you, but I can't protect you. Like, I'm gonna be the first one to go. You know?
Yeah, like I just living in that constant state of fight or flight. No thanks.
Yeah, that's not fun.
Mm-mm. Nope.
Damn. I'd be the only one then. Okay, well.
Okay, so I'm gonna come find you in the zombie apocalypse and be like, "Hey, protect me."
Yeah, I got a pretty good setup here. I got a garage. I have like wood in the garage. I can barricade the windows. I think I could last for like, I don't know, at least a month in my house before
But Holden,
running
you
out of
have
food.
no hand.
You have no hand, right? Yeah, Jeff Bezos cut it off for $2 million.
Okay, well, if Jeff Bezos in this scenario has paid me $2 million, I am buying a house in the mountains in the middle of nowhere.
Like all the haunted objects, like past. Look at that painting behind you.
But see, I can sick the ghost on the zombies and then like catch them events.
It's not real life. It's not realistic. It's not gonna happen.
If I get the ghost to procreate and I have an army of ghost babies.
An army of ghost babies. I hope I'm never alive to see that.
Yeah, that's actually how the world ends. This army of ghost babies takes over. Thanks a lot, Holden.
You manifested this.
You're welcome. Yeah, the ghost hunter we talked to, he told us that apparently asked specifically about haunted objects. I said, what kind of items should I buy? And his answer was like pretty much just like everything is haunted, which I was like, damn, that doesn't narrow the scope down at all, dude. But he said anything that somebody touched a lot during their life, it's haunted. And I was like, okay, so that's like beds, toilets, chairs, utensils. Like, okay, then it's way too broad here, dude.
Yeah, I don't like that.
I feel like as someone who really likes true crime, like, and I've just recently gotten into like horror stuff, but that scares me way more than true crime, and it's not even real. But like, my first guess, just based on what I watch, would be dolls or stuff like that, or clocks. Like, that's what's always haunted in movies. Like the creepy dolls. Like, who needs a creepy porcelain doll? It doesn't make any sense. Like, that would be my first guess if something was actually haunted.
I'm with you on that. Porcelain dolls, mirrors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
No, don't like it.
Thank you.
Paintings, I do think that painting behind you is her eyes. It's her eyes.
Oh, that is creepy.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's cute. It's kind of grown on me. I'm not allowed to hang it up, but like, I think it's cute. I have to move it every time I do the podcast, but like, I think it's a great picture, and the backstory is even better.
Seriously.
I wonder, like, I think I'm going to do some research on like Israel Key's girlfriend and daughter next, just to like see if they've like done any interviews, or like, I wonder how they feel about all of this, and he was so gung-ho on, I don't want this to be publicized. I don't want my daughter to know about this. And it's like, do you really expect she's never going to know? Like, you're missing and you're arrested, like you're in jail, like she's going to find out eventually.
I feel like you owe that to her, because like,
yeah,
not only
sure.
is it like her dad is like fucked up person, but like, if it is hereditary, I would want to know if my like parents were serial killers. I can like, maybe get therapy.
Yeah, I hope she's been in some therapy. Sometimes like after reading about him, I'm like I can't wait till my next therapy appointment, because I'm gonna like tell my therapist, like, let me tell you about this story. Like, you need to go research this, just as a person who's not really affected by it at all. Like, I hope that poor girl has had some therapy. There's no way that if I was his daughter, I feel like it would just mess me up for life.
Yeah, I think that I do think, yes, everybody needs therapy in some capacity, and especially in this instance. But I do want to say that I don't think that it's hereditary, but I do think it can grow within a person. Like, I think
I
that,
agree with that.
yeah, that I think that there's some people out there that they have some sort of like curiosity, some capacity, something that I don't quite understand, but it can grow within a person. I don't necessarily think that because your parents are bad people that you're going to be a bad person. You
Yep.
might have the capacity for it though, and who
Mhm.
knows what could set that off, or what could nurture that, I guess, for a lack of better words.
No, yeah, I agree with you. That makes sense for sure.
Kind of like a genetic predisposition to like
Mhm.
maybe like you have a higher chance of having certain thoughts, like not that you're going to, but
Mhm.
that
But
chance
don't
is a little higher.
necessarily act on them. Yeah.
Yeah, because I wouldn't want somebody to think, oh, because my parents are bad people, I'm necessarily like going to be set out
Yeah,
to be a bad
for
person.
sure.
But yeah, I think that some people, like, they're just, that's like, especially with his upbringing, like, it doesn't sound like there was anything that really could have set that off. But it
Right.
seems like he always did have some sort of like morbid curiosity that grew
Mhm.
into this like weird ego that I can't understand, but I'm thankful I can't.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think, like you said, like just because you have bad parents or you have bad experience with people in your life, that doesn't mean that you're going to end up like that. I'm a firm believer in that. Like a lot of people will use that as an excuse, like, oh, I'm this way because I was treated like X, Y, and Z. And it's like, no, there's therapy resources, there's plenty, you have the choice to decide what type of person you are. And like you said, like you might have that evil curiosity embedded in you, but it doesn't, like, you have the willpower and the strength to act on it or not act on it.
Exactly.
Just I can't imagine like not having that. I mean, obviously these sociopaths have like no empathy, and it's like that
No
missing
empathy.
that empathy is the craziest thing. Like I can't imagine not caring how someone feels, what you're doing to them, like not like seeing them in pain, like, oh, you know what, I'm gonna keep going. Like that's, I just don't get that. But I mean, again, I don't ever want to understand that.
I
Yeah.
don't either.
Can you imagine not having that like internal thing that's like constantly making you second guess yourself? Because I can't imagine not having that. I've talked to my therapist about that before, where it's like, yeah, how strange is that there's people out there that like don't sit there and overanalyze everything that they do. Whew,
Hmm.
that
Yeah,
sounds
wouldn't
nice.
that be nice? That would
Sounds
be great to not overanalyze everything that I do.
bad, but then at the same time, like, how do you get better at things if you just don't
Yeah.
sit there like, okay,
Yeah, if
like,
you don't overcome those things. Yeah,
yeah,
I think, you think like you were saying, like people, psychopaths, sociopaths, they don't have any empathy. But then you think about like narcissistic people, they don't have empathy either, but they have some sort of empathy for themselves, or they are capable of empathy when they choose it. But then, like, you think it's like a whole other step up with like serial killers and psychopaths. It's just like, I just don't, and I am an empath, so I feel like I'm too empathetic most of the time. But like, I just don't see, like, that's what I would love to know, is like we said, like, it's not necessarily genetic or embedded in you, but like people that, like, how do you get to a point to where you don't have empathy? Like, you are a human being. Like, I feel like we're wired, even though we don't have a ton of empathy, like there's something in all of us to where we have the capability, and it's normal to be empathetic. And so people that don't have that, I just will never understand those people. I don't know how people get to that, like how it becomes like that. Like, I just don't get it. I'm so glad that that's not my experience, but
I
yeah, it's crazy.
I think it's like, at least in my opinion, my thought is that like evolutionary, like you have this like track we go on, and then some people just like never, their line, or their brain didn't get that evolutionary trait of empathy embedded in them, and like from there on it's like, okay, well now they don't understand how anyone else feels, and then they can't empathize with people, and then some people become murderers. And again, just to clarify with everybody in the audience, if you lack empathy, it does not mean you are a murderer or you're going to be a serial killer. But because there are a lot of they don't have that trait, and they aren't killers. They're just fine people. They just don't have that in them. So
Yeah, for sure.
yeah. Well, this has been quite the ride, quite the journey. Morgan, thank you so much for joining and telling
Thank
us
you
all
for
about Israel
having me.
Keys. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And tell the good folks of God, good folks, I think I'm 50 years old. The good people of Between State Lines, where they can find you on social media.
So I basically only do my social media on TikTok. So I definitely plan on posting about this because I'm super stoked and super excited about it. My handle is kind of funny. So my middle name is Elizabeth. And so my username is Arizabrif, which is basically my middle name with a lisp. So it's Erizabref is my handle on TikTok. So that's pretty much the only social media that I really give out, you know. So that I don't really want people to find me on other social media. Like I don't even have my full name on my TikTok, and I want to keep it that way.
That's
That is totally fair. And you're also a really big Swiftie, so
Huge Swifty. If you guys ever need a guest to talk about Taylor Swift and her history, it's actually a very interesting story. I have all of the information on that. That's honestly what my TikTok is just Swift talk, just Taylor Swift content. So, yeah, huge Swifty. I won't digress on that subject, but yes, very, very proud Swifty. I just saw her, luckily it got tickets 11:30 the night before her New Orleans show a couple weeks ago. So that was an awesome concert. It was great.
all right. Well, we'll see everybody next week.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Bye.